All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host. So, what do we got? Well, we're going to review UFC 322. It was, for the most part, it lived up to its billing as this really, really well put together card. And the last two fights happened, and I'm not. Eh, it's always rough when your main and co-main are a little underwhelming. And I think the main event is getting a little bit too much hate, but we'll go into detail about that and hash that out. We will also preview next week's card, UFC on, I think it's on ESPN plus 123. I assume it's early morning. They're in Qatar. It's got some decent fights on it, though. It really does. So we'll give that a preview. And not a lot of news, which is weird. I kind of expected more. Frequently, the UFC will use the build-up or very immediate aftermath of major or bigger events to drop news. And you know something, guys? UFC people, we don't know anything about 2026 yet, apart from the White House card. Okay? Like, we're running out of time to start announcing some of that stuff. And I get that, you don't want to announce on another network's broadcast the stuff you're going to do on a rival network that you're moving to. So, okay, maybe we're not throwing it on the ESPN homepage or anything, but for crying out loud, you have a social media team. Some of this stuff should be out by now. Like, what are we seriously going to wait for like the last pay-per-view to be done before we start hashing this out? Like, come on, guys. That's a little bit much, yeah? Anyway, there is some news. We'll talk about some of the news. So that's kind of what we've got there. Uh, Anything you can do to interact with the product, of course, is always appreciated. Star rating, written review, like, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. Sharing is great. Sharing is always really, really helpful. And mostly just listening is the most important thing. So thank you very much for tuning in. Okay, let's jump into this thing, shall we? So UFC on ESPN, excuse me, UFC 322. Yeah, no, I can talk. How did predictions go? Pretty good, actually. Went 11 and 3. Um, I think the only one I changed was Morales and Brady. Couple of things about that. One, even rewatching some of Brady's last couple of wins when he kind of bounced back from that loss to Bilal Muhammad. A lot of his success during that time period was a bit more predicated on his ability to lean heavier into the strengths of his game. And that's, fine and dandy as an overall strategy, but if you haven't actually addressed some of the underlying issues that were being exploited, then you're going to wind up inevitably in that same position. And that's again, he looked good. It's not. I mean, beating Gilbert Burns was real good. Uh, Beating Leon Edwards was really good. Like he looked good. But when you look at like how did we get there? What were we doing? He kind of just doubled down on what he's already good at. And that's not the worst thing in the world, especially if your striking is still a work in progress, to sort of get back to what you really excel at, in his case being the wrestling and grappling. But just some of the stuff, man, that he was doing indicated that there's a lot of the habits on the feet and whatnot that are still present and hadn't quite been ironed out. And that's a problem when you fight someone like Morales. Then I saw them next to each other, and I knew Michael Morales was a big welterweight. I really did. But good grief. I mean, Sean Brady's, a fire hydrant. Incredibly muscular, but in the same vein, man, Michael Morales is a tank. He's just a 6 foot tall tank with an enormous reach. And I kind of just knew, like, okay, Brady's going to be in for that one. When I saw them next to each other after rewatching a couple of things about how Brady handled himself in the striking, just, I was not loving that one for him. So that one I changed my mind on. They got a guy on short notice to fight Malcolm Wellmaker, who wound up winning. I just rocked with Wellmaker. I had seen some of the highlights, at least from Ewing's stuff, so it wasn't a complete shock to me that he fought well. Was never going to pick him. Just very, very clear with that. Was never going to pick him. But, so we got that one. I mean, I only got 3 wrong, so me picking Chepe Mariscal was really, I mentioned it at the time, like that was more emotion than brain. Sabatini was always the more logical pick. Part of the problem, though, with Sabatini is there's like 4 other guys in that division near the top who do what he does, just better. And I know commentary was trying to hype it up like, there's some really good grapplers who can give Sabatini a run for his money in the grappling. I'd love to see him, square up with guys like Evloev and Sterling and Lopez and whatnot. And I don't. I get what they're trying to do, but all you're doing is pointing out that this guy does the same things that several of the top guys do, and they tend to be better than him. I don't know. More on that fight later. I don't want to get too deep into that. Then let's see. Yeah, Gregory Rodriguez probably should have got that one right, but this fight may have also finally removed my soft spot for Roman Kopylov. I still think he's a good fighter. Don't get me wrong, but there's some stuff in his game that he really needs to have fixed by now, and it just kind of looks like he hasn't. So there's that. Yeah, I think that was it. So, in 11-3, I'm pretty happy with that. Year to date, 357, 118, and 2 with 3 no contests. Let's see. Did I do math badly last time when I said I wanted to get to 400? If I can, it's barely. I mean, what, 43 more correct picks? And we're looking at... No, I don't think I can. There's only 3 more. There's only 3 more events this year. So let's count real fast. So Yukian and Hooker has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12. Has 14. 323 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. There has 14, so 28. And then Royval versus Cop. Yeah, I can't get to 400. Oh, man, I must have done terrible math last time. Okay. So that'll be a goal for next year. Is kind of what that's going to boil down to. Goal for next year, 400 correct predictions. As it stands, again, I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. So let's get into the fights themselves. Main event for the welterweight title. Islam Makhachev defeats Jack Della Maddalena 50-45 across the boards to claim the welterweight title, to equal Anderson Silva's UFC winning streak of 16 fights, to enter his name into the pantheon of people who have become two-weight world champions. And that's 11 at this point. It's still rarefied air, but that particular distinction is becoming a bit more common. I mean, we'll see how long, if that holds, but at the moment. Okay, so let's talk about this fight. Couple of things. Um, Islam Makhachev, it just needs to be said a few things about him. He is going to go down as one of the most impressive UFC fighters ever. You win 16 fights in a row in the UFC. That is remarkable. I mean, Anderson Silva did it. I think Anderson's win streak is probably more impressive. Now, don't kill me, any fans of Makhachev here, but I say that only because of those 16 fights for Silva, what, 15 of them were title? Sorry, not 15. I think 11 were title fights. Because of that winning streak, it's not all of Anderson Silva's career, but of that winning streak, his debut was non-title. The Luter fight was non-title because Luter missed weight and robbed him of having 12 successful title defenses. So there were those two, and then he had the 3 light heavyweight fights: James Irving, Griffin, and Bonner. So of that 16 fight winning streak, 11 were title fights. I have nothing but respect for what Makhachev has done, but if we're going to compare, strictly speaking, the winning streaks next to each other, the championship success of Anderson Silva is more impressive than what Makhachev has done. And Silva does, during that same stretch, have wins up a weight class. Not title wins, but he has wins. So, but that said, if I'm literally comparing what Islam Makhachev has done to Anderson Silva's epic winning streak, then you know what? That's a heck of a thing. So there's that. Makhachev is also the most successful lightweight champion in UFC history, but once again, you get this weird thing where there are a couple of caveats to that. And neither of them are really his fault, but they do need to be discussed. The second Volkanovski fight was taken on absurdly short notice. And the Moicano fight was really short note. Was weird because like Moicano wasn't supposed to be there. He took that fight on short notice. Not quite as short as Volk, but short notice. And was, not expected at all to be a real threat to the belt. So half of his title defenses that got him to most ever in the division at 4 have these weird sort of asterisks by them. I mean, asterisk might be a bit strong, but they have these caveats. The other two, mind you, are tremendous. That first fight with Volk is a great fight. The fight with Dustin Poirier is a really good fight. I'm not knocking the guy. I'm not trying to diminish his accomplishments at all. He's one of the most complete, one of the most remarkable fighters we've seen in a really long time. And it's just gotten to the point with him where when talking about what he's done, if you're not going to try and if your goal is not to come across as some giant homer for the guy, you do have to talk about some of this nitpicky stuff just partially to find things to talk about. I'm going to give him a lot of praise here too, just be aware. So there's all that. But again, 16 in a row in the UFC. Frankly, at this point, I don't know that, depending on what his next fight is, he's probably going to break Anderson's record. I was there for Silva's entire UFC run. I can't stress this enough to you guys. That's one of those records that I kind of thought was like, if I'd really thought about it, I mean, inevitably all records are broken, right? Barring, okay, there are a couple of caveats to that. If there's like rule changes or things like that that will monkey with some records. Like uh, or schedule changes. Like there's some of these, especially if you look like old time sporting records. Wilt Chamberlain's enormous single scoring game. I don't think that's ever going to be touched. And there's reasons for that beyond Wilt Chamberlain was really, really good. He was, mind you, but there's other stuff about the game that has changed since then. There's more than a handful of baseball ones that, if you look at some of them, there's no way you would accomplish that today for a number of reasons. Some of which are structural, like the number of games per year, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff like that. But Anderson's, again, if I thought about it, I'd go, yeah, someone will do that eventually. Like over a long enough time period, someone's going to do that. I was more. There's two things that Anderson did that I was genuinely kind of sure, like that those are going to be a long time before they're threatened, much less surpassed. One of them was 11 total title defenses. Um, 11 title defenses, right? Or was it 10? 11 title fights. I think it was only 10 defenses. Uh, I thought that one was really, really solid for a long time. I mean, GSP, you kind of thought maybe at a certain point. Then, for a variety of reasons, that never quite came to pass. Uh, we thought, man, in a world where Cain Velasquez when I say trained properly, I don't mean the tactical MMA side of his training. I mean the physical conditioning side of his training. Trained properly, he might have done something really special at that point in time. But and bear in mind, if you've never seen like the videos of Kane's physical conditioning training, oh, it's when I say it's painful to watch, I don't mean because it's really, really hard. I mean, man, so much of it is just bad. Like not how you should be doing that. So, and then, once Demetrius got to a certain point, I think we all kind of figured, with the state of the division and everything, like, yeah, there's a real shot he does it. And then he did. But, 16 fights in a row to win at the UFC level. Man, if you'd asked me which of his two records was going to fall first, I honestly might have said the title defenses, because you've had a few fighters who you kind of just knew like the potential was there to pull that off. Between how good they were and the state of the division they occupied. You do kind of need both of those things working in concert. And that's true of Anderson as well, by the way. Middleweight, when he was on that big run, was not a bad division. In fact, he was there long enough that it kind of saw ebbs and flows. Sometimes it was better than others, but it was not for most of his run a very deep division. You just had a few really, really dangerous sharks. So you had all those things kind of working together. And again, when I say there were a few people that you thought there's a real shot, Demetrius definitely, especially once he kind of got rolling. After the second wins over both Dodson and Joseph Benavidez, at that point you kind of went, okay, he really might pull that off. Who else did you really think had a shot at it? Ronda, let's be honest, Ronda. To do with both her dominance and the state of the division. Um, I think some of us thought maybe Joanna. Um, if she gets by Rose, That I don't know. Joanna had an outside shot. Amanda, honestly, if bantamweight had been even remotely deep enough to sustain Amanda's interest, and she doesn't bounce around between that and featherweight, she probably would have done it too. Like I think she has the requisite title wins to do it. They just got broken up across two weight classes. Um, I don't. Hmm, again, it's just kind of a big number, but there's Shevchenko maybe because minus the Grasso weirdness. I, I shouldn't say weirdness. The first fight was Grasso's clean. Second, not nearly so much, and then third wasn't even close. She had a shot at it. Again, that didn't come to pass, but she definitely had a shot at it. Um, but you kind of see what's going on there. Dominant champion working in concert with diminished division. And that's not an unheard of combination. To win 16 fights in a row in the UFC, that takes a lot because that's your way up to the belt as well as time holding the belt. It's not slipping on any banana peels. And it takes remarkable consistency to do that. And dude, Islam Makhachev has done that. He has turned into an incredibly well-rounded fighter. He has areas that he is more of a specialist in. He's definitely better on the ground overall. But you can't take him lightly on the feet. His striking game is on its own terms actually decent. Decent to pretty good. Sort of depends on which phase of the striking we're talking about, but he is competent in all of them. His kicking game in particular it's a thing that people really need to have an answer for. If you can get him into boxing in the pocket, like that space, he's a little bit more vulnerable in. Like if I'm like picking out where is he a little bit vulnerable, get inside kicking range, but not close enough to be clinched. You get him into that range and focusing on just the punching and the boxing, there you can have some success against him, but that's a real narrow space. It's a real fine needle to thread to just find an advantage. And that's assuming you're any good there. Because if you're not, then that's not really going to go your way either, is it? His clinch work is really, really good. His grappling is... This is kind of where we have to talk a little bit about some of the reaction to this fight. Because there's a lot of people who, in the aftermath of this, said this was just a repeat of Khamzat and DDP. And to that I say, bull. If you were equally unentertained by both those fights, I completely understand. Genuinely, completely understand that. But those are not comparable outside of subjective entertainment value. Khamzat Chimaev took a very low-risk approach. Took a position of I'm simply going to maintain position and at times not even try to advance it. And DDP, off of his back, had very, very little to offer. He kind of just flailed around or hugged. And I know that's a little bit dismissive. I'm painting a little bit broadly here, but that's kind of what happened. That is not what happened here. JDM, off of his back, had a bunch of things he was trying. he was constantly hand fighting, constantly grip fighting, which is really important against Makhachev because Makhachev's front headlock series is really dangerous. Anytime, one of the predominant ways to get up in MMA these days, and there's several, but especially if you don't have the fence, you pummel to an underhook, especially if you're in half guard. Pummel to an underhook, get to a hip, kind of wrestle up on a single leg, and then kind of just get up from there. That works a lot in MMA. It even works against guys with a good front headlock series. Makhachev has made mincemeat out of people doing that. Anytime JDM tried it here, you could see Makhachev wrapping the head, threatening that. He's got some really nice setups for it, too. Because he doesn't actually start with the Darce grip. He starts with a guillotine grip and then uses one hand to pull the other hand through. So if you're choking with the left arm, that's the arm that's going to be across the neck. He'll start with a guillotine grip and then with his right arm pull his left arm further through. And then left arm grabs the right forearm with his version, the shorter version of it, instead of getting all the way to the bicep. And suddenly you're kind of fighting from there, trying to get around it is hard. So JDM is constantly hand fighting, constantly grip fighting to stop Makhachev's hands from getting together at all, to further the choke attempt. And that stalls a little bit, but then JDM can't advance position because Makhachev is threatening him. JDM constantly tried to get octopus guard working, was constantly trying to get, Z guard. He's actually doing a lot of stuff on bottom. And Makhachev is just killing everything he's trying to do. That did wind up limiting Makhachev's actual submission attempts, and his ground and pound output was not terribly compelling. You're not going to hear me say otherwise. But let's also give JDM some credit here. He escaped a couple of really bad positions. I mean, at one point, he gives up his back. Makhachev gets both hooks in. Then he fights to catch one of JDM's arms in his hooks. BJ Penn used to do this all the time. Now, guys like Craig Jones and Gordon Ryan are big advocates for it because it actually is what creates the offensive tool disparity in that position. Because otherwise, if someone's got your back and they've got hooks or a body triangle, doesn't matter. If they've got control, they're trying to choke you with two hands. You're trying to defend with two hands. There's not actually a weapon disparity. There's positional disparity. And if you can strike in particular, there's opportunity disparity. But guys in MMA in particular at this point are just really, really good at defending rear naked chokes, and the gloves complicate that for people trying to get it. But if you can catch an arm, suddenly they're trying to defend with one arm while you're attacking with two, and that offensive disparity is untenable, barring a pretty serious skill discrepancy. He actually gets that. Makhachev gets it. He gets the arm trapped, and JDM just scrambles around through it and gets on top very briefly, and then the scramble continues. So he got out of some bad spots, and he deserves credit for that. There are a few things that hurt him in this one. One, I don't think he respected Makhachev's kicking game enough. Because they both come out southpaw. Now, JDM does a lot of switching, but he opened southpaw here. There's plenty of reasons for that. It actually limits... You have to change which takedowns you tend to favor whether you're fighting open stance or closed stance. If you're fighting closed stance, it's harder to get single legs. The angles are a little bit off. You're a little bit more vulnerable to power hand punches when you go in for it. Um, you tend to double leg. It's to do with hip alignment too. But open stance, the front leg is closer to grabbing, and you can pretty quickly transition from that to trips, or you tend to just go single leg instead of double leg when you're open stance. Defending the double leg from open stance is also a little bit easier, um, whereas defending the single leg from closed stance is a little bit easier. It's actually easier to limp leg. I don't know. Maybe your experience is different than that. Anyway, there's reasons. And so I think they were more worried about Makhachev grabbing a single leg and either going straight to a trip or using that to get to a clinch very quickly, because you can do that too. So you start with closed stance, and again, JDM switches a lot, but you start there because you maybe feel better about stopping the double leg. And that's okay, that's a perfectly valid consideration, but you better be ready for Makhachev's kicks. And I don't think JDM quite respected them enough, because Makhachev came out and with a couple of very solid calf kicks seems to have messed up a little bit JDM's right leg. And JDM's takedown defense is also, if you watch the Bilal Muhammad fight, Jack Slack did a really great breakdown on this. Go read it. I'm going to crib a lot from him. Part of what made JDM stop a lot of Bilal's takedowns was beating Bilal to level changes and body work. So body work helps get your down blocks and your underhooks in position early. It also is nice to hit them with. And when you do that, you can change your level to line up the body shots more easily instead of just trying to throw them from an upright posture. Anytime he read that Bilal had an entry coming, level change, body work, and he actually is sort of initiating a takedown or a crash before Bilal Muhammad does. And that negates a lot of Muhammad's ability to generate motion on the takedown. It's really, really good. Now, that doesn't play here for a couple of reasons. One, again, the leg kicks. Two, Makhachev's speed. Bilal Muhammad is a diligent and consistent fighter. I don't want to say he's slow. That does him a giant disservice. He's not slow, but he's not as quick as Makhachev. He also didn't do as good a job tricking JDM into not knowing what was coming. A lot of JDM's defense, an effective defense against Muhammad, was kind of predicated on reads. And he never got a read on Makhachev. Makhachev kept his hands up. He kept JDM's hands up. Some of the stuff he was threatening, again, kicks, just kind of messing with him. The movement and JDM just never got a read. So Makhachev was able to time a lot of the things he wanted to do. Really, this was not an exciting performance from Makhachev, but it is undeniable that he won. He has now won belts in two weight classes, two very, very stacked weight classes, mind you. He has cemented himself as one of the most impressive fighters the sport has ever seen. Now, this brings up, again, a couple of points of comparison. Again, Anderson Silva being one for just some sort of the things they've accomplished that are parallels. The Islam and Khabib comparisons are also a thing. So let me weigh in on that. As a general rule, I found Khabib a more compelling fighter to watch. If you're asking me who is the better overall fighter, it's Makhachev. Who had the better career? With this, I do think Makhachev has probably surpassed Khabib. He got more lightweight title defenses than Khabib, but Khabib's defenses may not have been as numerous, but they never had the asterisks. His title win had the little bit of an asterisk because of how that came about, but his defenses were McGregor, Poirier, and Gagey, all of whom had ample preparation time. All of them were fairly big fights. Uh, like I will, the Volk win from Makhachev is the best win he got as a lightweight champion, and that was, I love Volk. I will never disrespect him. The fact that Volk turns out to have had like the most success against Islam at lightweight of anyone is a big testament to him. Big, big testament. But that that being the best win of Makhachev's title reign is a little iffy. Um, so I think if you're just comparing their lightweight campaigns, I might still give the edge to Khabib. And again, personally, I prefer to rewatch Khabib fights over Makhachev fights as a general rule. There's a few exceptions to that, but Khabib being an overwhelming force of nature, whose striking was never great on its own terms, but was really good as a function of what he was trying to accomplish overall. But Khabib never went up in weight. He probably could have. I mean, both he and Makhachev are about the same size overall. Um, and that weight cut, man, I don't know. We're going to find out later at some point just how consistently hellish that weight cut was for both of those guys because they are very large men. Especially, they're large men who had to make 155. Crazy. But getting a second weight class title is a big deal. Beating another champion who was pretty darn close to his prime. JDM's still young. He's only 29. So I'm not shutting the door on him for the record. But beating a guy like that up a weight class this decisively, yeah, I do think at this point Islam's career has probably gotten over Khabib's overall. As for what's next for Islam, there's no shortage of options here, guys. We're going to talk about two other welterweights that made big statements on this card in the form of Michael Morales and Carlos Praches. On next week's card, you have Ian Gary and Bilal Muhammad. Shavkat Rakhmonov is still hanging out there. Islam's making the play to fight Kamaru Usman next, Kamaru Usman is so far down the list of people I want to see fight for the belt at this point that it's almost funny. I mean, look, Usman is the second best welterweight of all time. Dana's full of crap when he says he's the best. Usman did not surpass GSP. Sorry. But he is far and away the second best. The gap between him and GSP is smaller than the gap between him and Matt Hughes, I think, is probably still third. It's about where the argument would be. If we're talking as like, again, champions and their credentials as champion. Or Woodley. Woodley probably actually is above Hughes, all things considered. But yeah, the gap between Usman and Woodley is significant. The gap between Woodley and GSP is notable, but not significant, I think is the way I'd phrase that. So, but despite all that, He's got one win in the last, what, 3 years? Let me double check that. Because I don't want to be speaking out of turn. Let's see. So, yeah, okay. He has one win in 4 years. Over 4 years. Good grief. So prior to beating Joaquin Buckley, his last win was November of 21 when he beat Colby Covington. And frankly, you could have scored that fight for Covington. I mean, he was gone for almost a year before he lost to Edwards. The Edwards rematch was in fairly short order. And then he lost to Chimaev in that same year of 23. He missed all of 24 and then half of 25. Then he gets an okay win over Joaquin Buckley. And one win in 4 years over Joaquin Buckley is enough to get you a title shot at welterweight these days? I think not. I think not at all. Welterweight is stacked. It's maybe the best division in the sport right now. In fact, I think there's a very, very strong case that it is. And we're doing the old guy tour now? No, 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 no. Look, there's a lot of guys that you could go to here. And again, Usman is pretty far down the list, I think. There's a few guys who I think pretty solidly need at least one more, sort of no matter what happens. I think Prochas needs one more. He's just not that far removed from the loss to Gary, and that's a thing he has to overcome. Um, at this point, Rachmanov might need one. He's just been out for too long. Um, it wouldn't kill Michael Morales to get another one. He's really, really good, but he's also young and raw, and one more wouldn't kill him. Is kind of my thought there. But like, there's no way to really go wrong here. I just don't think Usman should get a title shot. The UFC seems to think that. The way when you know how to speak Dana White, you start to see some of these things. And Dana's spending the last 2 weeks going, no, Usman's the best welterweight the greatest welterweight of all time, which is comical and which is inaccurate, deeply inaccurate. But he only does that kind of stuff when he's trying to he's either trying to repair or sweeten a relationship, or he's laying seeds for something he's going to do that he knows is going to be a little unpopular and probably wrong, but he's going to do it anyway for whatever inscrutable reasons he has. Honestly, and so now you got to throw Jack Della Maddalena into the mix. I don't think we're going to get any clarity on this Makhachev thing until at least after next week with Gary and Muhammad. And until we get some kind of firm date about Rachmanov and what he's doing next, like there's still stuff. But welterweight is a great division right now. Stacked, not just with overall talent, but with some really, really good young talent. So I'm very excited for the future of that weight class. And there's a lot of ways you could go for Makhachev's first title defense. I just really don't want it to be Kamaru Usman, because I'm uninterested in that. If Usman gets one more win, like a legitimate win over one of the other guys, like if he beats, Prochas, hypothetically, that would be a thing. That would be enough for me to say, okay, we can trot the old guy out for this one. Depending on what everyone else is doing at the time too. I mean, the other thing about this is the UFC, there's a component to the theoretical meritocracy of the UFC that is simply availability and your willingness to help them get the trains out of the station on time. They consider that more highly than objective meritocratic standards. So Usman might be willing to do that. Makhachev said he wants to fight at the White House. Okay, everyone wants on that card. It speaks a lot to how dull the majority of the UFC presentation is that anytime they do something different, anything fun or interesting, everybody and their dog comes out of the woodwork going, please let me do that. Don't put me back in the apex in front of 24 drunkards. Um, so, again, we know nothing about that card. I mean, that's not until June of next year anyway, so who the heck knows at this point. There's also the Ilia Topuria thing that's kind of still floating out there. This fight removed a lot of my interest in that. Not that I think it would be a bad fight. Not that I think even Ilia Topuria couldn't win necessarily. Because he's got power and a really good delivery system. But Makhachev is not going back to 155. When Joe Rogan even asked him, how do you feel at welterweight, just the look on his face when he said, oh, this changed my life. Not having to worry about that weight cut. Just genuinely kind of life-changing. So he's not going back to 155. And honestly, Topuria at 170, I don't find interesting. If you want to make that fight, I think you at that point have to just make it for, you say welterweight's going to 175 and the inaugural 165-pound title fight will be determined between Makhachev and Topuria. That's about the only way I think I'd be interested. Even then, it's not my favorite thing. Welterweight's rocking and rolling. There are plenty of challengers at lightweight for Topuria. Neither of these guys is short of legitimate, deserving contenders. So let's, not log jam two of the better divisions we got right now for a super fight that, I don't know, again, lost a lot of its appeal with how this kind of played out. And that's not a knock on either man's fighting ability. It's just, are you really all that interested in that fight at 170? I mean, come on. Really? At 155, I think there was room because Makhachev at 155 had some issues with the weight cut. Not that he ever missed weight, but it was clearly a factor. And he did have a tendency to, at 155, slow a bit down the stretch. Not, fall apart, but I say this with respect to him. He was not the same guy in the fifth round that he was in the first. And notably so. And he still got some late, he did some late good work against Poirier. It's not like he did not fall apart. And even getting him to the fifth round was kind of a giant pain in the butt. However, it was another avenue. It did pose a question. If Topuria can keep a decent pace, put some threats on him, get him, a little bit off of his plan A, and extend the fight long, we've seen Makhachev hit and hurt later in fights. Volk did it. Poirier did it. Like that's a real thing. And so there were questions. There were a few questions to be asked at lightweight. I don't have any of those same questions really at welterweight. Makhachev's gas tank at welterweight seems superb. His chin seems better. His recoverability. I mean, JDM never really hit him flush, but welterweight seems to just wind up asking more questions of Topuria in terms of you're a small guy for this weight. He would be a small welterweight. He's not a big lightweight. He's not. I don't think Topuria is, undersized at lightweight, but he's not. He's again, he's on the average, maybe the lower end of average. If we're just talking size for the lightweight division, he would be a small welterweight, straight up small. So that fight just lost a giant chunk of its appeal for me, especially because again, unless the UFC does them at 165. At 165, I could be talked into being interested. It's only another 5 pounds of weight cutting for Makhachev, so I think he'd be okay with that, in theory. It's, 10 more pounds up for Topuria, and he'd be a small guy. He'd be, he'd be small for, call it super lightweight. He'd be smaller for that weight class, but that's the only way I'd potentially be interested in that fight. So, yeah, there's that. Yeah, this was a notable performance from Makhachev in terms of what it accomplished. The mechanics by which we got there, unless you're, again, kind of into the nerdy side of especially grappling, how to kill octopus guard, um, how to threaten someone trying to sit up and roll. There's stuff in there that if you're a big nerd about this stuff, you can find interest, but on average, as a general rule, maybe not so much. So, yeah, that's good. That's really, really good. It was good stuff. Well, it was significant stuff. If you were bored by this fight, I understand. This was not terribly compelling. Speaking of not terribly compelling, co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko defeats Zhang Weili via unanimous decision, 50-45 across the boards. Allow me to pat myself on the back. I don't do this very often. But I said there's a significant portion of Zhang's game and a significant portion of her success that is predicated on a physicality advantage that I didn't think she would have over Shevchenko. And lo and behold, there were a couple of other things actually about this one too, by the way. Anytime they got close enough to, again, tie up, the physicality edge to Shevchenko was obvious. Commentary tried to play it up as just being size. That is not... I'm not saying size didn't play a role. It did. To pretend that anyone at the flyweight weight class could do that to Zhang is no. There's plenty of fighters at flyweight that Zhang beats, I think. She just ran into a bad stylistic matchup and someone whose recent turn of tactical application of their game made that an even more nightmarish matchup. There's a few things here that I do want to touch on. Shevchenko, man, watching just the first minute of this fight, it was obvious Shevchenko was going to win. And that's not me insulting Zhang, but when I say obvious, I'm not trying to say that, Zhang was without weaponry, theoretically. But if you've ever seen, I've seen this fight in sparring a lot. If you've ever seen the vet who has seen and done it all and knows when they have to do something versus when they don't against someone struggling with that, you know how this was going to go. Shevchenko comes out and she's, when I say she's not bouncing, she's set in her stance and she's just not wasting energy. Zhang's doing a lot of bouncing outside of range, flashing the jab, like, oh, maybe I'm coming in, maybe I'm coming in. And Shevchenko's response to all this is just, you're not in range, and you can't get in range quick enough from there. So I don't have to care about what you're doing. And if you do wind up hanging out a little bit too much in range, I'm going to kick you. And if I think you're actually like moving into range consistently, I'm going to jab you. I'm going to fade back and throw the right hook, which she did. And Zhang just didn't have an answer. So the body kicks were a big deal. Then Zhang in the first round, like at one point, crashes. Like backs Shevchenko up towards the fence and then tries to blitz. Shevchenko knees her in the body and basically knocks her down with it. Then gets on top, and that's the rest of the round. The body work from Shevchenko just kind of killed Zhang repeatedly. She hurt her to the body a few different times. And then Zhang, when hurt to the body, is a little bit like, clinch. And Shevchenko's like, thank you, takedown. And Zhang's ability to get up, just not there. Mostly because Shevchenko doesn't like shoot. If she clinches first and then works, again, body lock takedowns for the most part, or stuff from the takedowns from the clinch. She's not a double leg from the outside. Zhang's good about stopping traditional shots. But even at even at strawweight, the people who had success against her grappling were those who could deal with her in the clinch. It was just, that's a incredibly small number of people who could deal with her physical strength and as well as her, technical ability there. But you take away the physical strength edge, which she did not have and was not going to have, then she's just kind of wound up with nothing. Wasn't a very exciting fight. Watch the first round for the most part. You'll get how the entire fight went. Shevchenko, after this fight, she's got 3 options, most of which I am not terribly interested in. So, the most realistic and probably most deserving option is Natalia Silva. I don't love Silva's chances against Shevchenko, but I think she's probably the deserving number 1 contender. There's also Erin Blanchfield, but I think Blanchfield is she's still a little too close to a couple of bad performances, and she fought on this card and frankly had a very, very poor first round, but we'll get to that. Then there's this weird one of her moving up to bantamweight and fighting, Kayla Harrison. Now, the assumption is still Kayla and Amanda Nunes. And I don't think that's an unfair assumption. That seems to be what everyone's most interested in, but if we can't get some actual movement on that, I'm not super interested in Shevchenko at flyweight. I mean, she's just doing what she's gonna do what she's gonna do. And if she wants to be there and, hold the post, I find that respectable and commendable in a lot of ways. Her and Kayla, moderately interesting. Not to the point where I would like to see, that sort of depends on how many fights at bantamweight Kayla has left, which is probably not very many. Like, that weight cut on her is legitimately insane. Like, makes me worried for her in levels of crazy weight cutting. But that's, kind of where we are with Shevchenko. She mentioned after this fight that, like, she's slowed a bit. She knows she's slowed. The end is coming for her. Like, nobody does this forever. But we're not quite there yet, but I think she knows she's getting there at this point. So, yeah, Zhang didn't answer whether she was going to stay at flyweight or go back to strawweight. I think if she goes back to strawweight, she gets that belt back pretty much whenever she wants to. But if she wants to, she might want to do another fight or two at flyweight. Because, oh no, I lost to the champion. Even though it was, a non-competitive fight. She might want to see how she fares against someone who isn't the literal best in the world in that weight class. I don't know. We'll see. She'll figure out what she wants to do. All right, so those two kind of killed the mood of 322 because we're going to be talking about in a row a lot of fairly good fights here. So Michael Morales TKO's Sean Brady, 327 of the first round. Once again, Michael Morales is an enormous welterweight. He's 6 feet tall. He had 7 inches of reach advantage on Brady. Just with the arms. He got long legs. He's got good clinch work. He didn't show it off here, but rewatch some of his fights. Like, that man's clinch game is good, especially along the fence. He's young. I mean, he's in his 20s, and he's doing this. There's still a lot of rawness to him. Like, once he got Brady hurt, some of his follow-ups, like, he got a little bit too in love with throwing the overhand, telegraphed it a lot. Some of the mechanics on his finishing sequence could have been better, but I'm nitpicking a little bit here. There's still stuff to iron out, but for his age, that's completely understandable and expected, quite frankly. But man, again, when I saw him and Brady next to each other at like weigh-ins and the official face-off and whatnot, like, I changed my pick in a hurry. Sean Brady just doesn't react well to striking exchanges. Bear in mind, I'm not just talking about getting hit. He doesn't react super well to getting hit either, but even if you don't react well to getting hit, he's not very comfortable navigating the striking. And that's a problem he really has to get sorted out. That was his big problem against Bilal Muhammad, who is not at all a great striker. I mean, dude, he got TKO'd by Bilal Muhammad. Like, you're one of Bilal Muhammad's, like, 2 finishes in the UFC, in his entire UFC career. That's a pretty... That does not speak super well of your striking in particular. And I know some people did the, well, why didn't he shoot? Because he was kept too far away. Like, Morales had a good read on him. And you can't shoot from as far out as he was. Especially with that height disparity. When I say you can't, I mean it's genuinely wasted effort. He would never have gotten close to actually like grabbing a leg or getting to the body. So he had to try and navigate that distance, and he just never could. And Morales has real good power. Yeah, Michael Morales is definitely... He could get the next title shot off of this. It would be a bit of a reach, but again, a chunk of this is going to come down to who's going to be ready on the schedule the UFC wants. So, yeah, good win for Morales. Real good win. Also at welterweight, Carlos Praches knocked out Leon Edwards. Good grief. One left hand to the chin. 128 of the second round. Some people were doing the, is Carlos Praches the most devastating puncher in the welterweight division's history? And no. He is a formidable puncher. But if we're just talking like who has the best one-punch knockout power in welterweight history, probably still Johnny Hendricks. I know, he was on the gear at the time. I don't actually care. And Johnny Hendricks gets forgotten in a lot of discussions around welterweight history, and I understand why. But dude, I was there when he was just ending people. Um, yeah. And you got some other guys in that conversation. Jake Ellenberger had good power. Robbie Lawler had real good power. Um, dude, Melvin Manhoef could turn your lights out. He fought more at middleweight though. Um, when I mean, for crying out loud, when Anthony Johnson, Rumble, fought at welterweight, which is absurd, but that dude would end your night in a hurry. Even at welterweight, he had sick power. So Morales deserves to be considered. He's certainly one of the more dynamic finishers. I mean, the knee to the body that he just killed Charles Radke with. I mean, Radke acted like he'd been stabbed. They just instantly keeled over. And he did have that real good, spinning back elbow against Jeff Neal. So he is a serious finish threat, but just like the most devastating puncher in the division's history. I question that particular one, but if we're talking about like who are some of the most potent finishers in the history of that division, Prochas definitely deserves consideration. He's rangy, he's powerful, pretty good defense on the ground. He fought off some back control from Leon Edwards here. Yeah, he's the loss to Gary. It being on short notice, is a little bit of a thing, and especially that he gave Gary some real hard problems in that fifth round in particular. But he's unlikely to get the next title shot, but he's not that far from it. Good stuff from him. Rough stretch for Leon Edwards, man. Wasn't that long ago he was champion. And then lost to Bilal, lost to Brady, lost here. He's in a tough spot. He's in a real tough spot. And kicking off the main card, Benoit Saint-Denis knocked out Beneil Dariush in 16 seconds. Dariush missed weight. It's only his second time doing so in his career. The other one was during the pandemic when I give a lot of people a little bit more of a pass, especially depending on when it was in the pandemic, because there were some weird. I shouldn't say during the lockdowns, right? Like there were some weird restrictions in place. So I give a lot of people more grace for that than I do other circumstances. He Dariush is just kind of shot. I mean, he's game. His heart's in it. His chin's not there anymore. Um, he's we're probably only getting a couple more out of him in all likelihood. The question at this point is, does he do the sad retirement tour through like BKFC? Saint-Denis wants to fight for the belt. That seems unlikely. Said he would like to fight for the BMF belt as well. That seems unlikely. Um, he is due. Look, he had the step-up fights against Dustin Poirier and Renato Moicano. He lost both of them. He had a couple of like get well fights, and then this was his like, okay, you have had your get well fights. Let's step you back up in class to a respectable gatekeeper and see where you are. Clearly, he's good enough to beat Beneil Dariush quickly. He's due someone Mateusz Gamrot level. Actually, where is Gamrot? Let me bring up the rankings here. Assuming the rankings page is working. It was not for me the other day. So let's see. He was 13. Dariush was 9. Yeah, he's going to be, Dan Hooker. I mean, Hooker's got to fight this coming weekend. And if Hooker wins, that's complicating, but I don't know that he beats Saryukian. So, but I mean, like, who would complain about Dan Hooker and Benoit Saint-Denis? Um, yeah, like Hooker, Gamrot, Fiziev, Pimblett, maybe. I don't know what their plans are there. We got to figure out what's up with some of the top of this division, guys. First of all, take Islam Makhachev out of the lightweight rankings immediately. That's not happening. But someone like that, he should still be fighting up. You know, he's definitely due another notable opponent. Put it like that. That was your main card. First three fights pretty good, and then again the main and co-main kind of killed the vibe. Really did. On the prelims, Bo Nickel killed Adolfo Vieira with a head kick, 224 the third. Good night. I was worried about Vieira for a minute there. Nickel had a good first round. Pretty decent jab. Showed off some of his wrestling. Some like high angle mat return slams and whatnot. Second round a little bit more pedestrian, but just bothering Vieira constantly on the feet. Then third round he showed a couple of body kicks and then took one up high and just, well, between the body kicks and the left hand, the straight left that he'd shown, a good way to set up your high kick, especially opposite stances, is get them thinking about your hand. Then you show the power hand, they reach to parry, and then the power leg comes around. So good win for Nickel. Don't know. He seems to be content not to be rushed back to the front of the line, so continue letting him develop. We don't need to push him super fast. Also at middleweight, Gregory Rodriguez defeated Roman Kopylov via unanimous decision, 230-27 to 29-28. Pretty clear first two rounds for Rodriguez. I thought Kopylov had the third. But Kopylov just not great off the back foot. Couldn't get Rodriguez going backwards, and really muted with a lot of his offense was Kopylov in this fight. Didn't throw a lot of kicks, and that's really the best part of his game. Solid win for RoboCop there. Aaron Blanchfield submitted Tracy Cortez with a crucifix rear naked choke. 444 the second. I mentioned Cortez won the first round. Blanchfield just keeps kind of wandering into punching range, which is not good. Not very good navigating that space. Not very good in exchanges. But second round, she did a better job of like forcing some prolonged clinch work, got the takedown. And I'm always a little bit of a sucker for crucifix rear naked choke. It's a fun little technique. Featherweight, yeah, Ethan Ewing with the upset of the night beats Malcolm Wellmaker via unanimous decision, 229-28 and a 30-27. This did not win fight of the night. It really should have. This was a good fight. Both guys are normally bantamweights, but Ewing took this on like 2 days' notice, so they both went, yeah, featherweight's fine. Really nice pocket work from Ewing. Good combination work. Wellmaker was able to land, but Wellmaker struggled to follow up, and then Ewing would just be in the pocket and kind of like land 3 or 4 punches. Good fight. This one's worth your time to look up. On the early prelims, Kyle Dawkins with a Darce choke over Gerald Meerschaert in 50 seconds. He dropped him with a punch, hurt him, then grabbed the Darce from top position, got the tap. Pat Sabatini defeated Chepe Mariscal via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. I actually thought Chepe stole the first. He landed a really nice head kick and an elbow right at the buzzer that cut open Sabatini. Dude, Sabatini's right eye was a mess by the end of this fight. Multiple cuts. But he's good at smothering. You know, and that's a thing that wins fights. I like his variation of the cheese donkey. So if he's got, other people call it like a broom handle, I think, trip, and it's your leg. So in his case, it was usually his left. So he's on the back or on the left hip. His left leg goes in front of Chepe's left leg and then behind his right. And then you try to off balance him from there. But his little addition to that is he would take his right foot and put it against Chepe's left like heel and ankle. So the left leg can't really adjust, and then you sag your weight back, and they're almost always going to come down on you. So it's a nice little technique. Yeah, my problem with Sabatini is like he's kind of like Movsar Evloev at home. You know, when I watch Movsar Evloev, we have Movsar Evloev at home, and it's Pat Sabatini. There's a lot of guys who do what he does at featherweight. You know, his win-loss record is impressive, but I've seen the guys he struggles against are usually the ones who can like best him at his own game or keep up with him there. I don't think he outgrapples the guys who do kind of this thing above him. I don't think he outgrapples Aljamain Sterling. I don't think he outgrapples Diego Lopez. I don't think he outgrapples Movsar Evloev, which just means he kind of exists, you know. Tough loss for Chepe. I also would have picked against him if I'd known about his shift in coaching. Not that I think it's a bad shift. He didn't go to a bad camp at all, but that first one with the new camp is usually a little off. It takes some time for athlete and coach to kind of gel. Fatima Klein beat up Angela Hill pretty badly. Unanimous decision, 230-27 to 29-28. That 29-28 is crap. Yeah, Klein just better everywhere. She almost knocked out Angela Hill with a kneeling back fist at the end of the first, and then or at the end of the third, and then hit her with a head kick. Hill just has a ridiculous chin because Klein did a number on her. Middleweights, Baisangur Susrakayev defeated Eric McConaughey via knockout punch. Nice finishing punch from him, 138 of the third. Susrakayev had a fair amount of hype coming into the UFC. Frankly, it's not justified. He might get there eventually anyway, but he doesn't look like the future of the weight class. He looks like a decent prospect. He wants to fight Bo Nickel next. I actually don't hate that fight. I don't know if it's going to materialize, but that's not unreasonable at this point for either man. And kicking everything off, Mateus Camilo defeated Vyacheslav Barshov via unanimous decision, 230-27 to 29-20. And I scored this for Barshov, but that guy can't buy a judge's decision for love or money. So, and frankly, I don't necessarily stand by my scoring of that one. As mentioned, there was no fight of the night bonus, which screwed over Ewing and Wellmaker. That was a good little fight. Instead, there were 4 performances: Michael Morales, Carlos Praches, Benoit Saint-Denis, and Bo Nickel, and no complaints about any of those. Those were all really good finishes. So, yeah, so UFC 322, the penultimate pay-per-view in UFC history, in all probability. Any further ones that they do are just going to be Dana throwing a hissy fit about wanting to do them, and if the fight's big enough, like trying to say, no, there's still an appetite for pay-per-view, let's charge $80 a pop. Just very briefly, like the aftermath of this fight, the MMA on Point guys made in their autopsy, I think they raised part of the reason the fatigue for Makhachev winning the way he did and why it really seems to have spawned a lackluster response from the fan base. This has been the story of a lot of fights this year. Control has reemerged. Some people were doing like both guys just did lay and pray. No, the man and co-main were allowed to lay and pray. No, that's an exaggeration. I've seen lay and pray. This was not that. I mean, Shevchenko passed guard into dominant position more than enough to justify that way that one went. And Makhachev and JDM, like JDM was doing stuff. And Makhachev was just killing it and then threatening fairly constantly. Maybe not like most people don't recognize some of the threats Makhachev was lining up because JDM was cognizant of them at phase like if you have like 5 steps to get through before the submission is really a threat, Like nearly finishing it is 5. Most people don't recognize the submission attack or the danger posed until step like 3.5. JDM was constantly fighting them around phase 1 and 2 because letting Makhachev get further than that is just really, really, really dangerous. But there was stuff going on there. But we've had a lot of fights that people were excited for this year under-deliver. The first fight between Pereira and Ankalaev. Snooze of a fight. Chimaev and DDP. Man, I was hyped for that fight. And what a catastrophic letdown. In so many ways. Let's just take a quick run through, the big fights from this year, shall we? There haven't been a lot of them. So Makhachev and Moicano was not a big fight. Came together on short notice. DDP and Strickland, I didn't hate that fight. The rematch between DDP and Strickland, I actually didn't hate that. I kind of enjoyed it, but I get that it wasn't what a lot of people wanted. The first Pereira-Ankalaev fight was a pretty serious letdown. Volkanovski and Lopez was okay. Muhammad and JDM was all right. But Shevchenko and Fior was on that card, and that also was not. Dvalishvili and O'Malley 2 was, I'm not going to call it like a big disappointment, but I mean the co-main event was Kayla Harrison, running over Juliana Pena. And I mean even that rematch between Dvalishvili and O'Malley had a nice finish, but the fight itself was a little bit too, one-sided to be all that interesting. Topuria and Oliveira delivered. It was short, was I think maybe the only problem there. Holloway-Poirier 3 delivered for the most part. It wasn't, their second fight, which is genuinely great, but it was very good. DDP and Chimaev didn't deliver. Ankalaev Pereira 2 was, fine. The co-main event there was Dvalishvili and Sandhagen, which certainly didn't deliver. Aspinall and Gane ended on an eye poke, for crying out loud. If we go through the pay-per-views this year, there have been more misses than hits. Now that I actually go through it all. I mean, for $80, if you bought every pay-per-view this year, God help you. You were deeply unsatisfied by a lot of those. Oof. So maybe, there's a little bit of just stuff coming to a head with Makhachev winning the way he did, being borderline the capstone of underwhelming pay-per-view main events this year. And we might get another one in December with Merab and Yan. That'll probably be moderately interesting if you're me. If you really... Yan has a reputation as this, killer, and it's not wholly deserved. He can be, but for the most part these days, what's the Jack Slack joke about it? The lead up to... The Yan fandom is 8 parts convincing you in the lead up that he's going to kill somebody, and then 2 parts after the fight yelling about how rounds should be scored. So we're getting Merab and Yan too, which might be uninteresting. Pantoja and Josh Van is probably going to be fine, but people disrespect Pantoja. Dude is consistently entertaining as a fighter, but again, no one cares about him, which is deeply unfair to him. What was on that card? Blachowicz and Guskov, who cares? Moreno and Tyra, that's interesting. Cejudo and Talbot, who cares? We'll go over that more later when we get to it. But man, if the last year for pay-per-view, for regular pay-per-view for the UFC, ends with Marab getting another, let's just say he does what he did to Jan last time. There's a 50-45 decision with a lot of clinch work on the fence. Dude. This will have been a terrible year. This has been a pretty bad year for UFC pay-per-views. Quality-wise, I don't know about buy rates, but more of them have ended in disappointment than have delivered. That's definitely something to think about. All right. I spent more time talking about all that than I thought I would, but, well, here we are. Thank you very much for sticking with me through all that. Okay, let's move on. So, UFC on ESPN plus 123. I'm assuming that's what it is. If it's something else by the time the night rolls around, the event rolls around, we'll let you know. But this starts morning. Prelims are going to start at 10 a.m. Eastern. Ugh. I just don't like being up that early on my Saturdays. That's 8 a.m. for me. Wait, Horiguchi's jerking the curtain? That can't be right. The UFC thing has to be wrong about that. There's no way. There's just no way he's curtain jerking. That would be absolutely ridiculous. All right, anyway. Main event. Yeah, most other places don't list him as the literal first fight of the night. So, okay. Yeah, most places okay, yeah, the UFC's just not updated that graphic. So, main event, lightweight, Arman Sayuki and Dan Hooker. This is a good fight. Might crown the next challenger for Topuria. Especially if it's Sayuki. If it's Sayuki, and he definitely deserves it. He would be the most deserving contender without controversy. Um, Dan Hooker's a good fighter, but Saryukian is just his only losses in the UFC are to Makhachev and Gamrot. He's got a lot of athletic explosiveness. Mostly he relies on his wrestling. He's still not much of a threat to finish. He can find them, but he's not much of a threat for it, historically at least. Hooker, he's had some issues. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, though. Last two were split decision wins. That really good fight with Jalen Turner. Then the fight with Gamrot. If this were 3 rounds, I actually think Hooker might have a better chance. Which is weird to say about Saryukian, but 5 rounds with Saryukian, it's hard to steal 3 rounds from him, and Hooker's going to have to kind of steal them. I don't think he's able to, given how they match up, I don't think he's going to be able to consistently win them. So he's going to have to kind of like neutralize Saryukian's relevant or visible offense, even in like clinches or on the ground, and then do more memorable offensive things. I mean, logically, this is Saryukian. The odds are with Saryukian in a pretty big way, around minus 500. Look, 5 rounds with Dan Hooker can be rough. That dude is happy to go to war. I think we'll probably learn some stuff about Saryukian here. I'll put it like that because he's escaped some other action-violent fighters without a whole lot of battle wounds. I think Hooker will probably give him some, but picking against Saryukian at this point is a tough thing for me to do, unless he's fighting like guys who I think have very, very specific style matchups that favor him, or, the very best in the division. And Dan Hooker, well, good, I don't think is like top 5 in the weight class. Co-main event, Bilal Muhammad and Ian Machado Gary. Only 3 rounds, which I think is interesting. 5 would favor Bilal. Let me say that right away. Like 5 rounds with Bilal Muhammad, I think would favor him. 3 rounds does favor. Dude, Gary is hard to get offense going against. His movement and his length and some of the threats that he presents, and his style, kind of take even some very, very offensively minded fighters and gets them out of offense first mentality. He's bigger than Bilal. He's longer than Bilal. Again, if this were 5 rounds, I think Bilal might be able to find ways in and find ways to wear him down. And could maybe get three of the rounds. Like, he's probably not winning the first 2. But he might have been able to, again, if over 5, find enough openings to get that going at some point. Just 3, Bilal's offensive output is also not super high. He has a very labor-intensive style, but the offensive output is within norms. And I think Gary's method of depressing offense coming at him works really well on guys like Bilal Muhammad. So I'm going to go with Gary. And again, 5 rounds might have changed my calculus, but 3 rounds I'm okay leaning with Gary there. Good old IMG. Next up at light heavyweight, this card goes downhill a little bit from here on out, guys. Sorry. Volkan Oezdemir and Alonzo Menafield. Boy, do I not care. Boy, does this division suck. Oezdemir's coming off of the loss to Carlos Ulberg. That was a pretty bad fight. He'd won 2 in a row before that over Bogdan Gushkov and Johnny Walker. Menafield. 2-fight winning streak, a split decision over Julius Walker, the old juice box. And a win over Umar Sy. That fight sucked. Prior to that, he'd been knocked out in back-to-back fights by Carlos Ulberg and Azamat Murzakanov. Now, both those guys are actually pretty good for light heavyweight. I think Oezdemir probably gets it done here. I don't know. Menafield has never really stuck out to me as a top fighter. So we'll go with the Ooze man. Welterweight. Sorry, I know that's normal for him. No, it isn't. Jack Hermansson's dropping to welterweight? Dude was a pretty big middleweight. Well, rangy middleweight at any rate. He's 37. He's making that cut. That's that's a thing. I mean, he's been trading wins and losses since like 2019. So I get that he might want to try not treading water anymore, but I don't know about that. He's fighting Muktabek Oralbay. Oralbay coming off that win over Tafik Masayev. It was a decent Kimura that he caught him with. Before that, he dropped the split decision to Mateusz Rebecki that broke a fairly lengthy winning streak. Hermansson I don't know how he's going to handle that cut. I mean, I assume he can make it. He clearly thinks he can, but because Oralbay is not moving up. Um, and that's really kind of throwing me off that he's making that weight class change. I'm gonna go with oral by, but let me asterisk this one. I need to see how Hermanson handles the weight cut. And I get that that's kind of a weird thing to say. That's what I'm hanging my hat on here. But I need to see how he handles that weight cut before I like make a serious prediction. Yeah, that's messing with me. All right, heavyweights because God hates us. I kid. Sergey Spivak and Shamil Gaziv. Spivak, two-fight losing streak to Jailton Almeida and Waldo Cortez Acosta. Only 1-4, 1-3 in his last four. The other loss was to Cyril Gahn. Gaziv, two-fight winning streak, wins over Dontel Mays and Thomas Peterson. Look, I don't rate Gaziv all that highly, but I don't know. The Blob is probably going to absorb Spivak here. It seems to me the most likely outcome. What are the odds on this one? Yeah, the odds kind of agree with that. Uh, Gaziv is also the regional guy, so they're giving him a very winnable fight. Flyweight after this, Alex Perez and Asu Almabayev. Actually, decent fight here. Almabayev coming off a win over Jose Ochoa. He had the fight with Manel Kopp. That was weird. That's the one where, like, the finishing sequence in particular is dubious, given the way some of the things Kopp was doing, but that loss to Kopp ended a real long winning streak from him, actually. So, and Perez, Perez has been around for a while. Uh, he's a good fighter, but he's been out for a minute. He's only 1-4 in his last five. He lost a title fight with Davison Figueiredo. Figueiredo guillotine. He was actually doing okay before he fell into the guillotine. Pantoja submitted him with a rear naked choke. He lost a decision to Muhammad Makayev. He knocked out Matthews Nicolau, salvaged a bit of his career. Then he had that knee injury in the Tyra fight. That was June of last year, so he's been out recovering for a while. He was supposed to come back earlier this year against Steve Erceg, but fell out of that. Um, I wish this was a more like closer to prime Perez because that would answer some questions about Almabayev that I kind of have. But this version of him, I don't know, man. That's just I don't know what to make of him at this point. The time off, the knee injury. Almabayev is still really, really like grappling almost exclusively. So I'd like to see his skill set kind of round itself out a little bit, but um, there's too many unknowns around Perez. I'll go with Almabayev. I'm gonna spell that. Almabayev. No, I did not. Yay, good for me. And that's your main card. So, good main event, relevant co-main event, even if that fight might not be super entertaining, for the record. And then Perez and Almabayev I'm interested in. The others not so. I have now morbid curiosity about welterweight Jack Hermanson. But Uzdemir and Manifield, that fight could go away, nothing would be lost. Ditto Spivak and Gaziv. On the prelims, we have Bogdan Grad and Luke Riley. Is Riley replacing somebody? Because otherwise, that seems like a really weird fight. Nope, that seems like it was always the fight. Okay, then. Riley is 11 and 0. So, undefeated, that's nothing to sneeze at. Um, this is his UFC debut. Grod, let's see, 15 and 3. 1 and 1 in the UFC. He beat Lucas Alexander, then lost to Muhammad Naimov. The odds are with Riley. I haven't seen enough of Riley's work. I will go with the odds here, out of respect. But let me asterisk this. I got to look up some of his stuff. And it's fairly readily available. I mean, he fights out of Cage Warriors, so they're good about getting their stuff up. Light heavyweight, God help us here, Abdul Rahman Yakayev and Rafael Cerqueira. This fight is another fight that could go away and nothing of value would be lost. The odds are enormously with Yakayev. Yakayev is Turkish, undefeated, 7 and 0. Coming off a Contender Series win. Former Aries champion. Aries is a respectable promotion. Cerqueira is 11 and 3. 0 and 3 in the UFC. Losses to Ivo Aslan, Modestas Bukauskas, and Julius Walker. Yeah, the tea leaves are pretty clear here. Hyav. I will go with those. I wouldn't be comfortable holding the odds on that one. Like, it's light heavyweight, and the dude's only 7 and 0. Like, they're giving him a. It's not quite a layup, but it's real close to a layup. But you know, light heavyweight being what it is, I would not feel comfortable having to pay out like 6 to 1 on a guy as on that fight. But that's just me. Flyweight next, Tiger Ulanbekov and Kyoji Horiguchi. This is a really good fight. Very much looking forward to Horiguchi being back in the UFC. Ulanbekov's only UFC loss is to Tim Elliott. He won 2 fights, lost to Elliott, won 4 in a row. Nate Maness, Cody Durden, Clayton Carpenter, and Aslat Maxim. Horiguchi is, again, back in the UFC for the first time since the UFC released him in what? No, he chose not to re-sign with them in 16. Felt disrespected by them. Was. He kept a long... Dude, he left them on a 3-fight winning streak. He then won a bunch more fights. As long as 3, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He went on a overall 13-fight winning streak before he lost to Kaya Sakura. That pretty big upset. Then he rebounded by beating Kaya Sakura. Lost a couple of Bellator fights to Sergio Pettis and Patchy Mix. He was beating Sergio Pettis before he got caught with that spinning back fist. Hasn't lost since. He's not beaten anyone you'll necessarily recognize. I mean, a few. He did this in like Ryzen and some Ryzen Bellator crossover events. There's a no contest in there to Makoto Takashi. Then he beat Takashi in the rematch. He beat Sergio Pettis in a rematch. He's been out of action since December of last year, so... But good to see him back. I still think he's, not quite the guy he was before, but he's still really good. Ulanbekov is going to be a potentially rough welcome back for him. The odds actually favor Ulanbekov. I'm going to go with Horiguchi, actually. I may be very, very wrong here, but I haven't picked an underdog yet. And Ulanbekov's good. Don't get me wrong, but I like Horiguchi, so I'll take that one. And if I'm wrong, so be it. Welterweight, Beksat Almakhan and Alexander Topuria. Let's have a look here. Almakhan, 1-1 in the UFC. He lost to Umar Nurmagomedov. That was fairly short notice, if memory serves. He hurt. Yeah, he knocked down Nurmagomedov in the first round, but couldn't handle the grappling. He did knock out Brad Katona his last time out, though, so there's that. Let's see. Alexander Topuria is coming off of that UFC winning his UFC debut. 6-1. Yeah, he beat Colby Thickness. Almakhan's the slightly more proven commodity overall, but I don't know. That's a tough one. The odds are pretty much even. I don't know enough to... Yeah, let me go with Almakhan, I guess. But man, I do not know about that one. Either guy is capable of winning that one. That one's basically a pick 'em. Okay. Middleweights, Ismail Nurudiev and Ryan Loder. So Nurudiev is in his second stint in the UFC, coming off a loss to Jun Young Park. That might have gone his way if he hadn't landed that blatantly illegal knee in the second round. He's kind of got turtled by the end of it by the Iron Turtle. Because, you know, who doesn't love Jun Young Park? Loder, 7-2. 1-1 in the UFC. Won a pointless season of tough. Then lost to Azamat Bakoyev. Now, Bakoyev is actually decent. Rudiev's not bad. And I don't know. I just don't think Loder's all that good. So that makes it Nurudiev. Okay, yeah, the odds are a little bit with him. Lightweight, Nurulo Aliv and Shakeen Rock. Shakwemi? I'm a British Isle. Where that? I don't know how to pronounce that gentleman's name. Aliv is 10-0. 2-0 in the UFC. Wins over Rafael Alves and Joe Selecki. And Rock. He's from the UK, but like that pronunciation changes wildly if that's, you know, depending on where in the UK. Rock is 12-1-1, 6-fight winning streak coming into his UFC debut. Has he fought anyone I know? Not really. Mostly been in Octagon recently, and mentioned Octagon's a legitimate promotion. This is probably a leave. Yeah. I might have to look Rock up and just see kind of what he does. Welterweight next, Nicholas Dalby, and this guy's name. I'm gonna do my best. Let me talk about Dalby first. Dalby, 2-fight losing streak, split decision to Renat Fakhretdinov that he could have easily won. That was a Saudi Arabia card that everyone kind of rolled their eyes at that decision. When we're in for one of these, huh? Then Randy Brown knocked him out. That was a pretty good fight, though. And his opponent, let's see, Saigid Izagakmaev. Mayev, Maev, Maev. Izagakmaev. Izagakmaev. Okay, that's as close as I'm gonna get, and we'll just see how bad I am when somebody who knows how to pronounce it pronounces it. He is 22-2, 5-fight winning streak. This is his UFC debut. Let's see. He's been fighting in one. He hasn't fought since 22, which is the story of most guys. Most MMA fighters signed to one championship at this point. Dalby's a tough welcome. Nicholas Dalby's still pretty darn good. But the odds are with the Russian. Dalby might be, he's still good, but I don't think he's quite adjusted his style to being a little bit on the downhill side of his career. The layoff for Izagakmaev, that's a real thing, though. I don't know. I'll respect the odds on this one. G-A-K-H. There we go. But Dalby's a pretty stiff test for a UFC debut. And kicking everything off at heavyweight. Oh, why are there... There's two heavyweights and two light heavyweights on this card. Why? Ugh. Marek Buho. Buho? That's going to be more of a Ja, isn't it? So, Buwu? Bushwu? I think it's going to be Bushwu. Gonna have to hear that pronounced. Bushwu, decent competitive jiu-jitsu record. Not a lot of MMA experience, only 6-0. All first-round finishes, good grief, all within the first 2 minutes. Okay. Given the state of heavyweight, I'm glad the UFC is looking to invest in some prospects, but 6-0 is a bit much. I don't know. He's taking on Denzel Freeman. Freeman 6-1, 2-fight winning streak. Coming from LFA, had a couple of PFL fights. Pretty sure this is going to be the Polish gentleman. Just curious about the odds. Huh, I can't find odds for this fight. Might just be late and I'm misreading. Yeah, that's where I'm going, so. And yeah, that I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that guy's name again. I'm just gonna apologize. And I will hear it pronounced properly and do my level best after that. All right. Yeah, that's it. So Saturday morning in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Come on by, say hello. I always appreciate it. Y'all know the drill at this point. And yeah, we're winding down the UFC on ESPN era. I'm gonna have to find whatever social media accounts are gonna be handling the UFC stuff. Because I don't like the official UFC's, X account. They're real stingy with their clips of finishes. Like real, almost unreasonably stingy about it. And I like to have access to that. So the ESPN MMA account was actually better about it. They tended to give you better stuff. So we'll see. There's going to be one for CBS or Paramount or whatever they wind up calling it. We'll see when that drops, I suppose. So yeah, all right. There's the only bit of news I have here. So Jake Paul is at this point, I think, pretty much officially not fighting Tank Davis after the lawsuit against Davis and the fallout from that. So he's been looking for a replacement. We talked a little bit about it. They're starting to make a little bit more noise about it being Anthony Joshua. I have a real hard time thinking Jake Paul accepts that fight. Anthony Joshua would hurt him badly. But the Jake Paul bubble is kind of bursting at this point. Like, enough people came away deeply unsatisfied with the Mike Tyson fight, and bear in mind that was free. I mean, this one would be too, but you kind of like you sheared the sheep one too many times there in too short an order, my guy. The public appetite for the Jake Paul sideshow seems to be drying up. I mean, that fight with Tank wasn't selling very well either. So he's in a position where he needs either a genuine, when I say a genuine novelty, I mean a novelty, but one that, like, the actual answer here, if you want to know, like, the fight that would actually draw interest is Francis Ngannou. It keeps the MMA thing going from earlier in his career. It's a big guy with a little bit of boxing experience who poses genuine threat to Jake Paul, which is why he probably won't do it. I mean, Joshua poses more threat. In fact, would probably do worse things to him. But at that point, Joshua is also, a former world heavyweight champion. So there's a little bit more prestige that comes from sharing the ring with him, even if you do poorly. So that seems to be the way some of the reporting's indicating. I don't know. The ring turning into basically propaganda for the Riyadh season means that a lot of that stuff becomes less credible and a little bit more dubious. But that's where that seems to be where things are leaning as I record this. So that's where we are. We will keep you updated if anything breaks on, the combat sports front related to that. Okay. I am a little bit tired. I meant to do this earlier, but I didn't because reasons. So I'm going to check the old social medias, and if there's no news that I think is worth talking about, then we will do plugs and get out of here. Nope, I don't see anything new there, so plugs. Monday, on Damn You Hollywood, we will be reviewing Edgar Wright's The Running Man, which unfortunately seems to be kind of a bust. Haven't seen it yet, so I may feel differently, but pretty much everyone agrees it's a disappointment, and that's sad to me. I tend to like Edgar Wright movies, but he might also be washed. So, I don't know. Again, haven't seen it yet, but full review will be on Damn You Hollywood. That's me and Mark, right? Alexis is currently scheduled to be there. We'll see if that holds. Yeah. Last week we reviewed Predator Badlands, and I did not like that movie. But, it jingles the keys, and people seem to be enjoying that. So, Godspeed. I said my piece on the review, and give that a listen if you are so inclined. All right. That's not me. Yeah, so that, and then, geez, next week is Wicked Part 2. Ugh. Is there anything I want to see? We're not reviewing Frankenstein until December. I don't care about Avatar. I really don't care about that stupid Anaconda doohickey. No, I got nothing. I legitimately have nothing to look forward to cinematically for the rest of the year. So, yeah, there's that. Alrighty. Then let's see. SmackDown on Friday, per usual. UFC event on Saturday. Then next week, the 29th, there's no UFC event. I will be covering Survivor Series on the 29th. Yeah. All right, so that's stuff a little bit out. Next week, we'll be back here to review UFC on ESPN Plus 123, so come on back for that. Till then, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.